The analyst who spent months hedging on Shedeur Sanders just stopped hedging. And I want to be precise about why that matters, because the source of this shift is everything. This was not a fan-driven wave of optimism. This was not the predictable recalibration of commentators who follow whichever direction the wind is blowing on a given Tuesday. The voices that moved this week are the ones who were most deliberately resistant to the Shedeur narrative for the longest period. The analysts who kept finding reasons to postpone their commitment. The panel members who qualified every positive observation with a counter-consideration, who deflected the top 20 quarterback question for months with the same answer. Ask me after the draft. Well, the draft is done. The picks are in. The offseason construction is visible. And the answer that finally came through from the people most motivated to stay skeptical is that Shedeur Sanders can be a top 20 quarterback in 2026. When the most resistant voices in a conversation start saying the quiet part out loud, that is not a minor development. That is the moment when a narrative that has been building for over a year finally reaches the people who were last to see it. Let me start with what actually changed. Because it was not Shedeur. He has been the same player through all of this. What changed is the organizational architecture being built around him in Cleveland, and understanding that architecture is the key to understanding why analysts who maintain their skepticism through everything that happened last season finally found themselves unable to maintain it honestly after this offseason concluded. The Cleveland Browns have spent approximately $100 million restructuring the offensive line that failed Shedeur so completely in his first professional season. That number represents a level of organizational investment that communicates a specific kind of internal decision in a way that no press conference statement and no public comment from any coach or front office member can replicate. You do not redirect $100 million in offseason resources to protect a quarterback position you are genuinely uncertain about. You make that investment when the decision has already been made and the task has shifted from deciding to building. Titus Howard, Zion Johnson. The additions to construct a professional-grade protective structure around a player who spent his rookie season operating behind one of the most dysfunctional offensive lines in the league. Add George Warhop as the coach responsible for developing that rebuilt unit, a man with a documented and specific track record of transforming offensive line rooms that arrived as question marks into groups that function above their individual talent level, and the argument that last year's performance struggles were primarily environmental rather than quarterback-driven becomes almost impossible to credibly dismiss. The analytical shift that I think reveals the most about this entire situation is the one tied directly to what the Browns built around Shedeur rather than anything the player himself did during the offseason. The holdout for the top 20 projection was always conditional. It was not that Shedeur lacked the talent to be a top 20 quarterback. It was that the question of whether any quarterback can play at a top 20 level is inseparable from the question of what environment that quarterback is operating within. Receivers who can create separation. An offensive line that can generate clean pockets consistently enough for a developing quarterback to execute timing concepts the way they are designed to be executed. A coaching staff that believes in the system and communicates that belief through every resource decision they make. When those variables are aligned correctly, talented quarterbacks tend to look like the players the original evaluation said they would be. When those variables are misaligned, talented quarterbacks look like problems rather than solutions. Last season was a misalignment experiment that nobody designed intentionally, but that produced exactly the results misalignment experiments tend to produce. This season is about finding out what happens when the environment finally matches the talent, and everything the Browns did between the end of last season and the start of this offseason was a public declaration that they believe the answer is going to be worth watching. The caveat attached to the top 20 projection is the piece I find most interesting analytically because it identifies the specific developmental step that separates a quarterback with genuine greatness in his game from a quarterback who consistently and sustainably delivers that greatness across a full season. The observation is this: Shedeur has to take the layups. When the completion that moves the chains and sustains the drive is sitting right there on the left side, a 5-yard out route against soft coverage, he has to take it without scanning for the bigger play. This is not a critique of his talent level. It is a recognition of the tendency that affects gifted players at this position specifically, the tendency to see what is possible when discipline requires attending to what is necessary. 3rd and 4, 5 yards available. Take it, stay on the field, keep the possession alive. Do not look for the route that ends the drive with a spectacular outcome when the route that continues the drive is open and waiting. The quarterbacks who master that balance, who can be completely unspectacular when the situation calls for it and completely explosive when the situation allows for it, are the ones who accumulate wins at a rate that separates them from quarterbacks who have similar ceilings but inferior floor consistency. Here is what makes this caveat so different in the current context compared to last season, and why I think the same concern operating in a different environment environment produces a completely different result. Last year, the easy throws were not easy. The receivers were not generating the separation that makes short and intermediate routes into genuine layups. When the system calls for a quick out route against zone coverage and the receiver is not separating from the defender, the completion percentage pressure does not come from quarterback decision-making. It comes from personnel reality. Shedeur was being asked to take the simple throws in a situation where the simple throws were contested because the talent around him was not creating the windows the concepts required. This season, Denzel Boston is a legitimate red zone threat who can win jump balls and contested catch situations against NFL-caliber coverage. Casey Concepcion creates vertical displacement that forces safety rotation, which opens the underneath and intermediate throws by removing the help coverage that closes those windows. Jerry Jeudy is in a contract year, which historically produces a specific and observable kind of focused professional performance from veteran receivers who understand that the market evaluates what they do in this specific 12-month window. The layups are going to be there this year in ways they were not before. The question the tape will answer is whether Shedeur consistently takes them when they are available. Now let me take you into the Watson dimension of this, because the honesty of the panel's assessment of his situation was the most revealing part of the entire conversation this week, and I want to give it the serious treatment it deserves, rather than a comfortable summary that softens the edges of what was actually said. $185 million. 3 good games returned. That is the ledger. Not a sustained stretch of winning football. Not a season where the franchise felt at any consistent point like it had found the answer to the question that has haunted Cleveland for longer than most fans want to calculate. 3 good games out of one of the most expensive quarterback contracts in professional football history. And now Watson is preparing for off-season camp. No pads, no live contact, operating against what evaluators consider a top 5 defense, trying to build enough of a performance case to take a starting job from a player who, with one of the worst surrounding casts in the league, made that offense believe in itself. That last piece is the one I keep returning to, because it was stated directly from someone who went deep into the film from last season. At genuine moments across that Cleveland season, the offense functionally believed it could win games when Shedeur was in control of it, not through false positivity or manufactured team meeting energy. Through something in the way Shedeur operates the huddle, something in the competitive certainty he brings to every possession, something that makes players around him recalibrate their sense of what is possible rather than just their sense of what they are being asked to do. That quality does not appear in any statistical category. There is no formal measurement for it at the combine. It does not show up in completion percentage or passer rating or any other box score metric. But coaches who have been in this profession for decades feel it immediately when it is present, and they feel its absence just as immediately when it is not. Watson is being asked to walk into an off-season camp and produce that same quality against a defense that finished last season in the top 5 in the league. Shedeur already produced it last year with far less protecting him than Watson will have in that camp environment. The honest assessment of what Watson's recent track record actually says is something the panel delivered this week without the softening qualifications that tend to accompany public discussion of a quarterback still under contract with a franchise. He has not been a good quarterback in approximately 6 years. The production was declining before the injury interruptions complicated the evaluation, and the injury interruptions made it genuinely impossible to determine whether the declining production was a temporary circumstance or a structural reality. The theoretical possibility that Todd Monken's system might unlock something that Kevin Stefanski's system suppressed is not zero. Quarterbacks do sometimes find new environments that restore capabilities the previous context was failing to utilize. But possibility is not probability, and the burden of proof does not sit equally between a quarterback who has demonstrated competitive presence and leadership credibility in an NFL huddle, and a quarterback who has spent 6 years producing declining results from behind one of the most expensive contracts in the history of the position. The tape will determine the outcome. That was the honest conclusion. The competition will produce real evidence, and real evidence is not negotiable, regardless of what any analyst projects in advance. The question of what Watson starting would actually signal was addressed directly, and the answer is worth stating clearly rather than dancing around it. If Watson earns the starting position through the competition, that decision communicates a specific organizational conclusion about where Shedeur's development currently stands in Todd Monken's evaluation. Not about the money, because the money is spent regardless of who takes the first snap of the season. Sunk cost does not come back based on which quarterback the team starts in week 1. And any organization that makes competitive decisions based on justifying past expenditures that cannot be recovered has already decided to lose in service of avoiding the appearance of a mistake. The only real question is, which quarterback gives Cleveland the best probability of winning games and building something sustainable? When you strip away the contract history and the public reputation and whatever organizational dynamics might exist beneath the surface, and just ask that question in honest isolation, the evidence available has been pointing in the same direction for a very long time. The organizational investment pattern is the argument I want to close on, because I think it communicates something more definitive than most people are willing to state directly. You do not spend $100 million restructuring an offensive line for a quarterback situation you are genuinely undecided about. That is not how NFL front offices actually allocate finite resources when the stakes are real. You make that investment when the quarterback decision has already been made internally and the organizational task has shifted from evaluation to construction. The 2 first-round picks, one on an offensive tackle whose primary professional responsibility is protecting the franchise quarterback on every single drop back, one on a receiver whose route versatility fits the specific system being installed around a specific kind of quarterback. These decisions flow downstream from one organizational conviction. Every coaching hire, every free agent signing, every draft selection that connects to the offensive architecture in Cleveland this offseason is downstream from a decision about Shedeur Sanders that was made before the public conversation caught up to it. The environment that last year could not support what he was attempting to do is now being constructed specifically around what he is capable of doing. That convergence, real talent meeting organizational commitment that was previously absent, tends to produce dramatic and fast results when the games begin. Last season was, in the most precise sense, a controlled experiment that produced clear information even though nobody designed it to produce anything but results. A quarterback with documented talent, genuine leadership character, and real competitive presence was placed in circumstances specifically structured, whether intentionally or through organizational failure, to make success nearly impossible. Insufficient first-team repetitions in training camp, inadequate pass protection, receiver personnel that was not generating consistent separation, an organizational environment that communicated uncertainty about him rather than conviction. He produced anyway, not the spectacular production that generates highlight packages, but the kind that shows up in the trust level of teammates and the quiet internal evaluation of a coaching staff that eventually looks at a player and concludes, this is who we are building around. The most resistant analyst in the national conversation looked at what Cleveland built this offseason and found they could not maintain their previous skepticism, honestly. That is the specific and meaningful kind of convergence that signals something real rather than something temporary. The evaluation that last season could never be fair is now going to happen in conditions that actually produce accurate information. Everything built around him this offseason was designed to make that evaluation finally honest. And everything the evidence has been accumulating toward for over a year suggests the answer it produces is going to be difficult for even the most resistant voices to argue with.